Welcome everyone to Boston 9/11 Truth, our bi-weekly Thursday meetings at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Today we have a very special guest, Captain Dan Hanley of Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and I will let him introduce himself. Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Susan, for having me on, and thank everybody for joining us here today. Some of you know me and some of you don't, but I'm going to assume that most of you aren't familiar with who I am and what our organization is all about. I want to make one quick correction. You said Pilots for 9/11 Truth. The organization name is actually 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers.
Right.
There was a group called Pilots for 9/11 Truth, but one of its co-founders passed away, and the other one bailed out of the 9/11 Truth movement. So they still have a website out there, but they're not. As far as I know, I wish I knew. I don't think they're doing anything else. But anyhow, about myself, I commenced flying at age 19 over 56 years ago as a civilian in 1968. And I got my private commercial instrument multi-engine rating over a 2-year period before going on to college. And after college, the Vietnam War was raging, so I had to make service plans. So I entered the Navy, and over the course of 10 years, I flew a P-3 Orion, which is a 4-engine turboprop used to track Soviet subs during the Cold War. In 1978, I was hired by United Airlines as a pilot, and over the course of the next 25 years, I flew 6 different commercial jet aircraft, accruing 20,000. All total, I accrued 20,000 flight hours over a 35-year career. Now, I'm not telling you that to sound like I'm boasting on my accomplishments. I just want to make that statement because I can unequivocally state without reservation and embarrassment. Anybody who's ever heard me give this spiel, I may sound like a broken record, but I could not have flown the 9/11 flight profiles, and neither could the alleged Muslim hijackers. They weren't qualified on the aircraft, and they were too inexperienced to have flown the flight profiles that they described that they flew. There's 300,000 pilots roughly in the world, and most of them haven't spoken out. As a matter of fact, very few have. And I want to point out that Philip Zelikow, the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, ensured that not one single pilot was permitted to testify before the commission as to the absurdity of this ludicrous notion that these pilots actually flew these aircraft, which is in part what we're all about, our organization. It started out as a Facebook group I created called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers, and we added a blog talk radio program, but we couldn't get pilots to come on to assert what I just stated. So we had to cancel that. And at the time I was working with David Cole, if you know who he is. He was working with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. And I said, we decided we were going to go to the Lawyers Committee with a proposal. Well, we did actually to Dave Meiswinkle and Mick Harrison saying, hey, let us interview pilots. Let us vet them for you. We'll turn them over to you. You can interview them and prep them to testify before a grand jury. And that's when we started interviewing pilots to get them to state that the hijackers couldn't have flown the aircraft. And we got several interviews done, and then Mick told us that they were too encumbered. They were dealing with the anthrax letters and the grand jury investigation, and that maybe they would get back to the pilots a little bit later. So what we decided to do, I got a hold of David Cole and said, David, I want to create a website. And he put me in touch with Doug West, who I believe does the Boston website as well. And together we created a website over the last 4 years with the help of other people, and it's loaded with information. And I currently serve as the director and public spokesperson for this global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers. And we got a website at 911pilots.org if you want to jot that down, because I'll be talking about that. And we also have a contact us. We have a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots. And if you want to join us, because it's not restricted to pilots, we accept members of the general public. We got to join us tab at the top of the home page. All we need is your name and email address, and we can add you to our email list. And we also have a contact us tab if you want to get a hold of us for whatever reason. So anyhow, the purpose of our organization is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers in control of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked and remotely controlled through employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computer and guide it to its selected target, whether that be a building or another location, because we get flack from people saying there were no planes. But anyhow, our goal has been to recruit highly trained and experienced pilots, whether they're active or retired military or civilian, who will go on camera and attest to the fact that the hijackers couldn't have flown the aircraft. And we've been somewhat successful with that. We went out to many pilots that we managed to get email addresses on and didn't get near as many responses as we had hoped for, but we did record some pilots, and they're on our website. If you go to a drop-down menu on the site, you'll see pilot interviews. And we were posting them on Facebook, on YouTube, until YouTube started taking them down, claiming they were hate speech, these interviews we were conducting. So that's been our goal, one of our goals anyhow. But I'd like to turn to this remote control business, because too many people don't believe it's possible that they could have remotely controlled a huge aircraft like we claim that they did. But remote control of a big aircraft goes back 80 years to 1944, towards the end of World War II, where the United States Army Air Corps launched Operation Aphrodite in Europe, in the UK to be specific. But what they did was take old B-17 bombers and gut them out to lighten the weight of the aircraft, so they could load 30,000 pounds of Torpex, which is a highly incendiary compound, on board the aircraft. Pilots were required to make the takeoff, but once they got airborne, they bailed out of the airplane, and these aircraft were remotely guided to targets in Europe. Now, this was 80 years ago. And we got a short film clip on our website on the remote control page that describes how Joe Kennedy, JFK's older brother, was killed in one of these top secret missions when the airplane blew up due to a malfunction before he was able to bail out. But there's a number of other examples of remote control aircraft we could have cited on the website, but we didn't do it. We jump ahead 40 years, and you can imagine the technology advancements that took place. In 1984, where NASA and the FAA conducted a joint crash test experiment in a remote location. They took a 4-engine commercial jet, a Boeing 720, loaded it up with crash dummies and cameras because they wanted to test crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. And they took this thing off around the pattern without any pilots on board by remote control for 6 approaches. Before they finally crash landed in the final approach to the runway that they were operating off of. And this was 17 years before 9/11. I'll mention that the Predator drone, the military drone aircraft, was introduced into service in it conducted its first maiden flight in 1996. If you jump ahead to the early 90s, this system, the uninterruptible autopilot, was developed and produced. There's a Wikipedia article, if you want to go to it, that describes the system and says it was designed to prevent would-be hijackers from commercially commandeering a commercial aircraft and guiding it to a safe landing at an airport where an auto land could be made. But the other part of the article is misleading, because they said it was patented in 2006, where somebody reading this article would say, oh, they came out with an anti-hijacking measure after what happened on 9/11. Well, we have proof that it was developed and produced in the mid-90s. We've had informants come forth who have testified they either worked on this system or worked for like Raytheon and some other companies that will attest that it was made available in the mid-90s. And we assert that this system was in fact used, as we mentioned before, to either fly airplanes into a building or fly it somewhere else, and whoever knows what happened to it. But that's the remote control page. We've got 4 or 5 videos on that page, and we recommend you watch them, and it'll reinforce what I just said. And one of them in particular was an avionics technician named Wayne Anderson that was interviewed by the late Captain Rob Balsamo, where he describes in detail that he saw this system operating in 1996, 1997. So he's one of our witnesses, and I actually talked to him for an hour and a half one night. I won't say where he lives or anything, but he said that he was hounded by the airline industry, asking him, why did you conduct that interview? You're creating problems for us. So what he had to say, hang on just a second, let me do something. What he had to say in that tape recorded interview is very important. And finally, I'd like to turn to the smoking gun that most of you are already familiar with, and that is the 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker Hani Hanjour, who supposedly flew American 77 into the Pentagon on 9/11. Backing up a bit, he came to the States in the mid-90s and took some flight training. And it's well documented that he's a very poor student. I mean, even in the mainstream media, ABC News, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, and other major news outlets reported that he was a poor student. So much so, he went back to Saudi Arabia and came back prior to 9/11. And he wanted to re-enroll in a school that he attended before, and they wouldn't take him because they said he was such a poor student when he came there before. They didn't want to waste assets on him. So let me describe the supposed profile that he flew. American 77 took off from Austin Dulles Airport heading for the West Coast, and it got to cruise altitude for a while before making a U-turn back into Washington and starting a descent. And at 7,000 feet in the descent, it commenced a descending, accelerating, corkscrew turn, 330-degree turn to arrive precisely at the surface. And that's the trick, to arrive precisely at the surface at 500 knots without skidding the aircraft on the surface, to hit the Office of Naval Intelligence on his first attempt at over 500 knots. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, this same profile was replicated in a flight simulator, and it was actually flown by pilots from the group Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and they crashed the simulator trying to do this maneuver. And yet we've been led to believe Hani Hanjour, this inexperienced pilot, completed it on his first attempt. But the story gets better than that. Hanjour went to the Freeway Airport in Bowie, Maryland 1 month prior to 9/11 and wanted to rent a Cessna 172, which is a light single-engine prop-driven aircraft. And when you go to an airport like that and they don't know you, you've got to go up on an evaluation flight to prove you can fly. Well, Hanjour didn't go up on it one, but he went up on 3 evaluation flights with 2 separate instructors, a guy named Ben Conner and a woman named Sheila Baxter. I didn't interview either one of those, but they reported to the chief flight instructor at the airport named Marcel Bernard, who I did talk to on the phone. He confirmed this story, that they told him, don't rent him an airplane, he can't handle it, and he refused to do it. So what did Hanjour do? He goes down the road to Congressional Air Charter, another fixed base operator, and went up flying with a guy named Eddie Shalev. Eddie Shalev comes back from the flight and says he was a good pilot. So what appeared in the 9/11 Commission final report? Only Eddie Shalev's testimony that he was a good pilot. The FBI and a staffer from the 9/11 Commission interviewed all four of these pilots, the three from Freeway Airport and Eddie Shalev, and not one mention was made in the 9/11 final report about the three at the Freeway Airport. It was concealed by Robert Mueller's FBI and Philip Zelikow, 9/11 Commission. He was the executive director I mentioned. And so who was Eddie Shalev? He was an Israeli who came to the States a couple months prior to 9/11. He had been in the IDF, okay? He is the one that flew with Andrew saying he was a good pilot. So the question arises, was he Mossad? We don't know. He disappeared and returned. We believe he returned back to Israel, but we're not sure. As far as the Twin Towers maneuver goes, people claim that no airplane hit the tower. That was holograms that were generated by CGI, and that they used blue beam technology to do it. And I always get attacked, but I want to point out 9/11 pilot whistleblowers doesn't go any further than to say the hijackers couldn't have flown the airplane, but the uninterruptible autopilot system could. And I also did mention that the advanced navigation systems on today's modern commercial jet aircraft is derived from cruise missile technology and is extremely accurate. So it can hit a target. It's so accurate within 2 meters. That's how accurate the system is. And we're not claiming one way or another whether airplanes hit the Twin Towers. All we're saying is the hijackers weren't able to do it. And you could argue all they had to do is point the airplane and fly it into the building. Well, it's a little bit more complex than that. They were flying around 500 knots, and the buildings are only 208 feet wide, and the wingspan on a 767 is about 160 feet, so there was very little room for error. And yet both aircraft, as a matter of fact, all three aircraft hit their targets on their first attempt with pinpoint accuracy. If those pilots flying in if the aircraft going into the Twin Towers had been off by a few degrees on their heading, they would have missed the towers by a substantial amount. As a matter of fact, the United 175 that supposedly flew into the South Tower, if you want to believe that there was an airplane there, the airplane banked into a 30-degree bank 12 seconds out, and had the airplane not made that turn exactly that point in time with that angle of bank, someone's computed that it wouldn't have missed the target by 800 feet. So we said with that closure rate and at that speed, it isn't as simple a maneuver as just pointing the aircraft and going. As a matter of fact, I watched a video of a foreign crew that attempted it in a simulator with a 747, and they couldn't hit the building. So that pretty much sums up what 9/11 pilot whistleblowers is all about. And everything I just talked about is on our website and more. There's a lot of videos there you can watch. But what I just mentioned, the United States government knows every single detail because we told them about it. I mentioned that we approached the lawyers committee and they were too encumbered with other things to do. So we decided what we were going to do was go to politicians and bureaucrats and demand that they open an investigation into our allegations that the aircraft were electronically hijacked and remotely controlled. But we started out with this because we all believe that the United States government, at least some elements of it, were complicit in the planning and execution of 9/11, and that they would never investigate themselves. So actually what we wanted to do, and we did, was run the full gamut with letter writing, emails, and phone calls to every relevant level and branch of the U.S. government. And we started out with the FBI, and I personally made a phone call figuring this was an exercise in futility because I dealt with him on another whistleblower issue before. And I talked with an agent, and I said, I want to report uh, uh, information concerning a crime. They go, what's a crime? I go, 9/11. There's a long pause on the phone. And they said, well, what are you reporting? And I said, that the 9/11 aircraft were electronically hijacked and remotely controlled. And the conversation went downhill from there. There's another long pause. And then they said, she took down the information. She was polite enough with that, doing that. Then she says, we'll call you back if we have any additional questions. So I actually waited a couple months and called them back. And they looked me up on the computer and they go, you called this in before. I said, yeah, but I didn't get a response. And now they got incensed that I was calling them back and basically said, don't call us, we'll call you. So my next stop was to the Transportation Security Administration because we figured that this was a hazard, this system was a hazard to commercial aviation, the ability to electronically hijack an aircraft. And I talked to an individual there that was very congenial, was actually receptive to what I was saying. And he said, I told him I took it to the FBI and they didn't want to do anything. So he said, why don't you go to the FAA and Boeing? Well, we thought that's a good idea. So trying to get through to the FAA is next to impossible. You get a menu when you call and it's not relevant to what you want to do. So I finally found out that if I submitted an FAA hotline report, that I got my foot in the door doing that. And they assigned an FAA engineer from Seattle to our case. And when he learned the details of what we were saying, because I data dumped a bunch of information on him, he says, we're going to need more time to review this case. And I called him and he was very tight-lipped. And that was the last I heard from him. He wouldn't answer emails, phone calls, letters, etc. So we went to his boss in Washington and they turned us back over to the FAA hotline people. So we thought we're getting nowhere. They wanted to close the case on it and we wouldn't let them. So we went to the FAA administrator with letters and emails saying, hey, your department isn't doing their job. We're presenting evidence that supports what we're claiming with our assertions, and they didn't answer them. I finally had a guy that was the director of investigations for the FAA say, we're going to close this case. And I said, don't you dare. And we went to the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and didn't get a single response. When we try to call these people, all we get would be, well, they'll return a call or we get a voicemail. So their voicemail box. So we start thinking, well, look, the FAA and the Department of Justice should be investigating this because this is the greatest crime ever committed on American soil in its history. So we went to the FBI, the Assistant Attorney General, Criminal Division, and the Attorney General, and also to the Department, the Director of National Intelligence, April Haynes, and said, hey, why don't you join hands with the FAA in conducting an investigation into our allegation? Nothing. Phone calls, nothing. All we got was voicemail. So I finally wrote a letter to Biden saying, hey, your administration's not doing its job, knowing all along that we were getting nowhere with this. So I live in Islamabad, Pakistan. I've been here for 14 years. And we decided there are 2 billion Muslims on the planet. And next to the next of kin, no one has been more harmed by the lies of 9/11 than those 2 billion Muslims, because Islamophobia is still rampant. And their religion and the Muslims have been trampled on for 22 years for crimes they did not commit. When you look at their holy prophet's been slandered, the Quran's been desecrated, and Islam's been demonized. So we thought we would have an audience that would be receptive to our allegations that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft. So I was trying to get in, I was close to doing it, to seeing the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I wanted to brief him. My wife had worked for him during his campaign for his office, and I had to go to the military secretary. I'm making this too long. I'll shorten it up. I wound up going to the ISI, which is the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, which is the equivalent of the CIA here, and they're probably listening to this conversation right now. But I had to, I went to them asking for an interview, and they finally invited me in on March 7th of 2022. And I talked to a colonel for about a half hour, 45 minutes, describing in general what I knew about 9/11, in particular about the uninterruptible autopilot and Hani Anjur, the smoking gun and all this. And he was very receptive, saying, we're going to bring you back in. The Director General wants to meet you. We're going to assign a film crew to you. We're going to do a documentary, et cetera, et cetera. And the very next month, Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, was ousted from office, and that ended that. So we didn't stop there. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation is like the United Nations of the Islamic world. It's comprised of 57 representatives from Muslim countries, predominantly Muslim countries from around the world. It's like the United Nations. And so I wrote a letter and followed up with a phone call to the Secretary General. And basically what we said in the letter was that Muslims have been smeared, so is your religion. We've got all this information from all these organizations out there, including the Lawyers Committee, Architects and Engineers, the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and Richard Gage. We said, look, we got all this evidence that conclusively prove that the World Trade Center buildings were brought down by controlled demolition and not by jet aircraft impact damages or the jet fuel fires that ensued. And also that the aircraft couldn't have been flown by the hijackers, that they were remotely controlled. Nothing. We decided to include the Muslim World League, which is a comparable organization based in Mecca. And we wrote, actually, I'll go back a little bit further. I ran across a video that Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister from Russia, invited the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to Moscow. And in the video, it showed the contingent of his whole group sitting across from Lavrov and his whole group. And Lavrov is claiming, hey, he was hailing these wonderful relationships that Russia has with the Muslim world. Well, I knew, following politics in the region here, that both Russia and China were trying to line themselves closely with Muslim countries. So I wanted to conclusively prove that no one was going to respond to our petition. So I wrote a joint letter to Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Secretary General of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Muslim World League, and followed them up with phone calls. Now, when I called the two latter organizations, the OIC actually said, I want to speak with someone directly that I can dump information on, and they give me an email address to somebody, and I would email them and they wouldn't respond to me. So I'd call back and they said, hold on, and they'd put me on hold, and then the phone would hang up on me. So it was the ultimate stonewall. I mean, this organization that should have been very interested in what we had to say wasn't at all. And I just tweeted something on Twitter about the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, saying, should the OIC stand for the Organization of Islamic Cowards? And I had a couple of Muslim scholars come to me on email and Facebook message and said to me, Dan, those two organizations are puppet organizations of the United States and Islam. So knowing that, it was an exercise in futility. But I feel like given what the lawyers' committees run the full gamut legally, at least I believe they had. They took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, who refused to hear their case. And we ran it the full gamut, both domestically and internationally, the information that we have, and no one seems interested. So that's been my case, my argument all along. I see people on social media arguing about who's right and who's wrong with their theory. And I said, fine, if you're so certain that you're right with what you're saying, take it to an organization. And if you find one that's receptive, please tell me about it because I can't find them myself. So I really think, and as sad as it is, and I don't want to dishearten anyone or stifle your enthusiasm about 9/11 truth, is I don't believe any country in the world will investigate 9/11. There's 193 countries in the world, and only 4 that I'm aware of leaders spoke out, and that was Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, Ahmadinejad in Iran, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and an Italian president, I can't remember his name, who came out and said it was the CIA and Mossad operating in concert to plan and execute the event. So given that so few people won't respond, you have to ask yourself, because they're not stupid. All these leaders have to realize that it was an inside job. I mean, we all figured it out, and the information's out there. So why don't they speak out? Well, I think for one reason, they're afraid of getting whacked. They're afraid of winding up like Muammar Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. And the other thing is, in my mind, my own worldview here is that the most powerful, wealthy, ruthless subhumans on the planet Earth called in the 9/11 hit. And they wield so much power, control, and influence, and I'm talking about the World Bank, IMF, et cetera, not just that so many of these countries are totally dependent upon those institutions for their very survival, that these leaders won't speak out. And I'd be interested to hear your comments on that. That's basically where we're headed. And our target audience is still the 2 billion Muslims for the reason I stated. And if you see, if you're on Twitter and you follow me at all, you see what I post. It alludes to that fact that there were no Muslim hijackers, and that's our target audience. So myself, because we're not at a dead end, and we'll never give up trying to push the issues that we're talking about here. But from my end, I personally am trying to do podcasts. I've been getting invited on some podcasts, and I'm trying to get on with Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, and Jimmy Dore. And there's a program in Chicago. It's called The Dean Show, and the host is a guy named Eddie, who's a Muslim revert, and he has over 1 million Twitter followers, and it's a huge program that goes out by cable to a bunch of countries, in particular Muslim countries, and that's personally what I'm shooting for. I want to get on a program and tell people how to contact me so I can do more program, because as far as Muslim country podcasts or news reports, I was on Malaysian TV twice, here once, but the guy wouldn't let me say anything, and a Moroccan radio program. But other than that, I tried to get my foot in the door the last several months with Press TV in Tehran, Iran, and a station called Tolo TV in Afghanistan, and also in Syria and Iraq for obvious reasons. We want them to know how we feel about the Muslim hijacking the aircraft. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll mention that we bounced it off the lawyers committee, architects and engineers, the other groups I mentioned, the International Center for 9/11 Justice and Richard Gage, saying, hey, why don't you join hands with us because you're not having much success in the legal arena in the United States, why don't you join hands with us and approach the Muslim community? And they all basically said, look, our information's out there already, Dan. You're free to use it however you want, but they are not going to actively pursue the route that we've been going down, the road we've been going down here. So I'll mention also, we created, it took a couple of years through collaboration with several people, but 9/11 pilot whistleblowers created a documentary called 9/11, The Advent of the Ninth Crusade. And basically, it covers what I just talked about, plus some. It goes into the Israeli influence of the U.S. government, AIPAC, the ADL, etc. And I'll probably be called an anti-Semite because I wrote the thing, but that's all right. But if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me on the contact us page on the website. On Twitter, you can send me messenger. On Facebook, I'm Dan Hanley, and on Twitter, did I say Dan Hanley 4? And I'll even give you my email address if you wanted. Captain Dan Hanley 24@gmail.com. So that's our contact us page. There's our website. If you look at these slides here, it basically tells you what we're all about: demanding the truth about 9/11 and justice for the world. And then we ask the question, could unskilled pilots do this? And we say no. And that's what we're all about. We're not saying that a cruise missile hit the Pentagon or holograms. We're not even denying an explosion in the basement of the Twin Towers before the collapse, because William Rodriguez has asserted that he was down in the basement and felt the explosion before the first airplane hit. So that's basically it. If you go to menu there, Susan.
Yep.
Yeah, these center like cockpits, hijackers, pilot interviews, and remote control. And then we got letters down there, and that actually goes into more detail, all those different countries that we've tried to contact. And you see China letters up there. That's only because there was China Eastern 5735 last year, did a nosedive from 29,000 feet to the surface in 2 minutes. And we contacted the leadership of China and sent them a 66-page document on the uninterruptible autopilot. And I actually had my foot in the door there, but I'll call him an operative he went by Jerry, who was going to get me to Beijing to talk to the management of China Eastern. But then COVID had a 2-week quarantine, and we put it off, and it didn't happen. But that's what the China letters are all about. So.
Wow. Yeah. And then you got 3 for the Pakistan letters.
Yeah.
And a whole flood for the US letters. Looks like maybe 14, 15 of them.
Yeah.
And 4 Russian letters. And here's Marcel Bernard.
Yeah. That one, if you look at it, click on it there, Susan. If you click on it, it's actually an email that was sent. It was a letter and an email sent. And you scroll down a little bit, you'll see who it went to. It went to all those people right under his picture there, okay?
Yeah.
And it iterates everything I just said about Hani Hanjur, about the uninterruptible, about nothing. I mean, the fact that Marcel Bernard claims he refused rental of a Cessna 172 a month prior is hypercritical information, testimony and they ignore it. So
Hmm.
it was an exercise in futility, and we kind of knew from the outset that we weren't going to get any response from the government for the reason they're not going to interview themselves. So
Right.
anyhow, that's about it. I think I'm about out of time here, Susan.
Well, I
Anybody's
hope
got
you
any
can
questions?
stay with us for some questions.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to stop share, but if you want me to bring anything up, I can bring it back up. Or
Okay.
allow share screen. If you want to share a screen, let's see, have I got the right thing here? Yep. So if you want to share any screens, you can do so.
Okay.
All right. Normally we have Al Magaletta moderating our group, but the poor slob is vacationing in Granada right now, so he's not able to join us. But he did preempt a question. Let me bring that up. He wanted me to ask you if you think why you think Putin doesn't come out in favor of 9/11 truth. Has anyone put it to Putin?
Oh, I did.
Okay.
I mean, I'm through Sergei Lavrov, I put the one question, one letter to, and then I sent another letter to him, Xi Jinping, and those two leaders of those Muslim organizations, asking that. What we asked was, why don't you consider forming an international Islamic commission for 9/11 inquiry, a Muslim 9/11 commission, where they collect all this evidence and promulgate it? And I didn't get any response. I tried calling twice the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Russia, and also the same office in China. I even had an individual that spoke Chinese on the line with me when we talked, because only 2% of the Chinese speak English or can understand it. But we got nowhere with the phone call. So, but the reason I think that he did, one of three possibilities. One, he's afraid of getting whacked. Two, the timing isn't right. Maybe they're considering it sometime in the future where it's more opportune to bring up that issue. Or three, they're just not interested in doing it at all. So we can't figure any other reason, given the political landscape we're operating in right now. We can't think of any other reason why he would not respond.
Okay, thank you. And Lawrence Fine, who we all know as Lorenzo, he has a question.
Hello,
Hi,
Larry.
Dan. Hi, how you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good.
Good. I'm glad that my mic is working. I had to come on my phone because my computer was not working again.
Yeah.
I just attempted to follow you on Twitter, and I am not able to do that. So
Have I blocked you?
it's possible. I don't know what
Okay,
you've done.
because then possibly what I wind up, I'm not saying this to a lot of people. I got like 64,000 Twitter followers, and you might have made a negative comment of some type that I wasn't going to argue about, and I wind up with people like that because I get it viciously attacked by the no planes people.
I never give you a negative comment. I'm in disagreement with you about the control system, and the aircraft
okay.
and aircraft engaged, but never have made a negative comment about you.
Okay, well, let me go back and check it after I get off here, and if I did, I'll unblock you. But let me ask you something, Larry. You said you don't agree with the remote control aircraft?
I do not agree with remote control, although remote disabled or remote alteration. I believe there was a target planted on both of the buildings, and I believe that the aircraft had onboard autonomous target seeking guidance system, not necessarily I don't believe they were civilian aircraft either.
Okay. Right. And I know your reasons for that, the pod on the bottom of the aircraft, but let me try to I'm not when I tell you this, I'm not talking down to what you said, but you need a better understanding of the navigation systems on the jet. You don't need an external targeting source. I talked with David Chandler and Robert Fisher about this, and Robert Fisher is trying to rebuild the uninterruptible autopilot system, saying there has to be some kind of a targeting information that the airplane homes in on. But actually, they uplink course, speed, and altitude at waypoint into the system. And that's what the airplane flies, just like a cruise missile. So it doesn't need an external guidance system. It's got its own internally. It uses GPS, triangulates with radios and other systems into this flight management computer. So I want to correct you on that, because that isn't how it works. There isn't targeting information needed from an external source.
Well, it's just a difference of opinion, Dan, and I
Yeah,
also,
okay.
I also believe that the aircraft were not civilian airliners.
Well, I know about the pod on 175, the 4 photos that were taken, and I know about the supposed swap over Stewart Air Force Base that Rebecca Roth talks about. So I'm familiar with all those things, but again, I don't go into debating those issues because we feel
I'm just mentioning it. I'm just,
yeah.
So we know that we are in agreement that there were no Muslims at the controls of these aircraft, and that's pretty much where we part opinions on what the aircraft were and how they were equipped.
Okay. Well, I'm not boasting. I'm only speaking from my experience and operation of these navigation systems when I talk about not needing an external source to target the aircraft.
Right. I was thinking about the incredible accuracy, and I actually did see some images of some people on the side of the building on scaffolding outside the building, where they had actually removed windows at some point right in the area that the aircraft struck. So I mean, that's one of the things that has led me to suspect that there was a target system installed in the Twin Towers.
Okay. Well, let me see. I don't know how to share a screen on this. I'd show you something. Here it is. I see it now. Okay. Let me share a screen here for a second. I got to look at what I'm doing here. Share. Am I sharing screen now?
It's beginning.
You will be in a second.
Your screen sharing.
I see it. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see it now. Close other apps. Okay, you haven't got the right share up there. Something, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can I go back here now?
Stop share screen and start over. Make sure you pick the right screen.
Oh, okay. Share screen. Let me try this. I just wanted to show you a couple things on it. I want to show you a couple things on the website. A couple articles that
you could send them to me after the call, or
I'll do that rather than take up time here. Let me stop share. On the website at the top, there's something that says articles, and if you scroll down, it says MH370, and there's a 66-page document that goes into great detail about the development and production of the system. And the article relates to Malaysia 370, the 777 that disappeared over the Indian Ocean. But okay, you're going to do it for me. There you go. Evidence of the hijack of Malaysian Airways. Now, if you go to articles up there, Susan, again, you can download that article if you want.
Okay.
You go to Monahan up there, the fourth from the top. This is Aidan Monahan. He lives in Vegas. He wrote this. I interviewed him. The plausibility of 9/11 aircraft attacks generated by GPS-guided aircraft autopilot system. He goes into detail on this study he did using the Freedom of Information Act that shows that prior to 9/11, especially close in, these unbelievable enhancements took place regarding the accuracy, both internal to the airplane and external, that would even refine further than this cruise missile technology that was used as far as accuracy goes, because you're only talking 2 meters using this internal system on the aircraft. And
Right.
it's evidence on an autoland where it touches down the center line of the runway and tracks down the center line. So it's there, and I'm familiar with how it operates.
Okay, there's no way that I'm gonna get into a debate about which system it was, other than
Yeah.
the
We're
fact
not
that
going to debate tonight. There's two other people who have questions, and it's very late for Dan. Okay?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
Are you all set, Lorenzo?
only just one more thing, which I'm gonna again note that I believe that the aircraft were not civilian aircraft, but ex-military aircraft outfit. It could have been a remote or a control system exactly like you talk about. There's no argument that it could be. But
Yeah.
the main point that I want to stress, we know that there are no Muslims aboard because, well, if it was an ex-military aircraft with remote control, there would really never need to be anyone on board except to do maintenance on the aircraft.
Right. And if you're familiar with Dov Zakheim, he supposedly contracted 32 Boeing 767 tanker, 767 aircraft to be refitted as tanker aircraft to Eglin Air Force Base.
Yeah.
If you want to research that, you're probably familiar with it already. But I I used to talk about that, but I don't anymore because it gets into the planes and no planes issue, and that isn't where we're at.
Well, it's not a no planes issue. It's what were the planes issue.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Even that, Larry, we don't debate one way or the other because all
Right.
we're trying to say is the hijackers couldn't have flown the airplanes.
And we totally agree on that.
Yeah.
All right. So Craig McKee has a question. Unmute.
Oh, hold on.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, Dan. I
Craig.
wanted to ask you. I actually am glad to hear you speak tonight because I didn't really realize that this was the main focus of your work. I'm interested to know, though, my personal contention, and I think it's the belief of a majority of people in the movement. Not that that matters, but that the plane that flew towards the Pentagon was not on the official flight path, and therefore, it never hit the building. This is my contention, that it flew over the building, and I would very much like, to know what you think about that, even if that's not really the main thing you're bringing to various agencies and different people. I'd like to know what you think of it as a pilot, because I think you have a level of expertise that the rest of us don't have. And I have a follow-up to that, but
Okay.
maybe I
So
could just start
you're talking
with
about
that.
the flyover where a missile came in and hit after
No,
the
no missile. I don't contend there was any missile. I just say that a 757 didn't hit the building.
Well, what did
and I
hit,
think,
Greg?
well, I don't know, and I'm not sure that I have to know necessarily,
Okay.
because I believe that the official story falls if it wasn't Flight 77, and if we have convincing evidence, and I think we have in terms of the damage or lack of damage and the lack of wreckage at the site, plus eyewitness testimony that had the plane north of the Citgo gas station, it seems like we have lots of evidence that there was no plane crash there. So something else did it, but I think, so I'd like to know how you feel about that position.
Well, you know who David Chandler is?
Oh, I do indeed. Yes, I do.
Okay, well, him and Bob Fisher had me on share screen Skype one night showing me all this evidence, and they say that there was a plane, 77, hit the Pentagon, and there was wreckage and body parts in the building. And then you've got Adam Eisenberg, a friend of mine. Are you familiar with him? He was
yes, I used to work with Adam. I don't anymore.
Oh, okay. You don't. Okay. I won't ask why, but he
Okay.
claimed that he was a first responder and he saw no body parts, airplane parts. So I know
Right.
both of them, and I don't defend either one of the positions. I'll tell you right now, I don't know. I've heard compelling evidence on both sides of the story there, and I don't know what hits the Pentagon. That's why I don't come out and say it was American 77 because I'm not sure, because I've heard differences of opinion. So that's why we just stick with Andrew couldn't have done it.
You think that
That's-
that's, I mean, yeah, it seems like that is a kind of a point that maybe isn't going to be as, it doesn't seem like that position is going to have as much impact as the question of did a plane crash occur or not occur. I mean, that's my opinion, but maybe I can just add something then. The flight data recorder, and this is where I wish I had the knowledge that a pilot has, but the flight data recorder has been a thing of contention. But the National Transportation Safety Board produced an animation based on the flight data recorder, and the animation that they produced had the plane to the north of the official path, in fact, to the north of the gas station, and too high to hit the building. And then David Chandler's group, claimed to have analyzed this and they found supposedly 4 seconds of undecoded information that magically makes everything line up, and it turns out, So I wondered, as a pilot, does that make any sense to you that the National Transportation Safety Board would show us an animation based on the flight data recorder that actually disproves the government's story? And why do you think they would do that?
Craig, ask me how much I trust the NTSB and FAA on anything that they put out.
Right, but what they're producing undermines the position of the government. It doesn't support it.
Okay. Well, I haven't followed that close. I mean, David Chandler showed me how when he adjusts information, how it illustrates how the poles were taken down, etc. But I haven't. As a pilot, I mean, I can tell you as a flight data recorder records almost everything that the airplane's doing. But and I know that they Warren Studd, I believe, is the one that took the damaged information off the recorder and produced evidence.
Allegedly.
Yeah, right. That's why I can't get into the debate, and even if I could, where would I take the information? That's my whole argument with the truth movement right now. We spent 3 years plus going to every organization I just told you about.
Right.
And look what the lawyers committee is going to do. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go with it? We debate these issues amongst ourselves. We debate these issues amongst ourselves, and I get attacked viciously when I even mention uninterruptible autopilot about from the no planes people, saying, you idiot, there were no planes. So I say back to them, well, yeah, there was the planes with passengers. What happened to them? If you think it was a hologram, then where did those planes go? And some people even come back and say, well, there were no planes. None of them ever took off. I go, don't be ridiculous. As a matter of fact, I was in the Newark airport and know for a fact that morning that United 93 took off with passengers and crews. So and then again, I'll say to them, okay, you believe Project Blue Beam and all that, take it somewhere. Tell me where you're going to take it. That if I didn't prove anything else to myself and hopefully others the last 3 years, is no one either within the U.S. government or the court system or outside the U.S. government, because none of the United States Western allies are going to entertain the idea of opening an investigation. That's why we went to the Muslim world and China and Russia saying, is anybody out there going to do it? So, I mean,
well, let me just close on sorry. Let me just close on this. I don't want to take any more time. There's another question coming, but you mentioned David Chandler a couple of times. I'm strongly opposed to Chandler's position, which I think is extremely problematic for the truth movement. And the only reason I mention that is because, and I understand you're not taking a position on that, but I would just point out that it is, you say there's disagreement on those issues that I raised. I would argue that there is very little disagreement among most people in the truth movement. It is only just Chandler and his group that are kind of making it seem like there's a real controversy about it. And I think their claims are dubious at best and outright dishonest at worst. So I hope you will, not sort of just eliminate that whole issue simply because you think it's too contentious.
I'm not.
Okay.
Like I said, Craig, I don't know. I don't know. And even if I did hold a position, I've already proven I don't have anywhere to go with it. So
that's the hard part, isn't it? You're right. Yeah.
all I'm trying to do right now is educate 2 billion Muslims. I
Right.
want to get them sad and upset. As a matter of fact, our documentary I talked about was intended to do just that. It was for people who still believe the official story. And if you'll notice, it's targeted at the Muslim community because the last 5 minutes is a tearjerker. And our intent was to not only make them sad, but angry at what happened, how they've been lied to. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Craig.
Can you post information about the film in the chat or someplace?
Can I post it? Let me think how I do that. Where's chat at here?
It should be your bottom panel.
Okay, I got it. Let me go back. Let me go back and hold on. I gotta clear some stuff up here. I'm doing it. The documentary. Let me see where it's at here. Yeah, here it is.
On your
I'll send you.
website.
It's on the website. It's the number 2 item on the menu.
Okay. Yep, got it. All right, I'll put it in the chat.
I can find it then. Thank you.
Susan, I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah, but Ray was next. Who was
Oh,
that?
sorry. Okay, I gotta raise my hand. Yeah, I'll do that. Sorry.
All right. Ray, go ahead.
Good evening, Dan. Hanley.
Hey, Ray, how are you?
Hello. We see each other for the first time. We've spoken on Facebook, and I've been listening to your thoughts about remote control, and I must agree that is a kind of the most logic way to control these planes on 9/11. It's not up to it's the most incredible story how these people got into the cockpits, and not one cockpit, not 2 cockpits, not 3 cockpits, 4 cockpits they breached, and that story is so out of imagination, because a normal pilot would react immediately if the door of his cockpit was breached. He would let it know to the ground. So I think remote control is likely to be used. And if you listen to Betty Ong, I think Betty Ong is a really the most. She was on 11. She was talking about hard to breathe. So you can imagine that something was used on these planes to suffocate pilots, and that they were not in charge of the plane anymore. So then taking over a plane by remote control seems really, really logic. That these planes were flown with passengers on board into their destiny and targets. And I think that if I heard you correct, you think both planes that hit the Twin Towers were remote control, and that you think that the Pentagon plane was remote control. And then we have one more plane, and I want to have your thought about this last plane, which is also remote control, because that ditching, that flying upside down of this aircraft really is also this kind of picture which I have in my head, what I cannot explain it. How can, if someone is on the controls of this aircraft, can he be able to fly a passenger plane upside down? So was Flight 93 also remote control?
Well, again, I don't like to get into this. I'll give you my own personal opinion based
yes.
on information. And it doesn't reflect what 9/11 pilot whistleblowers believes, but anyhow, getting back, you talked about the twin towers. I just want to mention something. We're not saying twin planes hit the towers. We say if they did, they were remote control, but getting to Flight 93, David Cole, the guy I mentioned before, did extensive Freedom of Information Act work for the Lawyers Committee, and I worked with him for several months. And he told me, if you want to believe what he said, was that there were airplane and body parts scattered over a 70-acre debris field, and that body parts DNA matched with passengers on the airplane, which intimates that 9/11, United 93 was there, and with the scattered debris field would possibly indicate that the airplane came apart in the air and not in that smoking hole. But that's if you want to believe what I just told you. So
And
there wasn't.
I've spoken to Jonathan, to David Cole, and I have also, I know his position, but my
Right.
question was, do you think that it's possible that this fourth plane was also flown by remote control? And it's not how it ended up, because I think you can have my story, because there was this really this message from a male voice saying we have a bomb on board. I think that's really really crucial in this whole 9/11 saga, is this person saying we have a bomb on board. So having a bomb on board, having explosives on board of that plane is I think also it creates the destruction on the ground from 93. But if this plane was also flown by remote control, it is actually that whole 9/11 was a remote control action.
Right. Well, the plane did make a turn heading back towards Washington, D.C. And that I would contend was remotely guided. Okay.
Yes.
And I personally believe they aborted the mission because United 93 took off 45 minutes late, right?
Mhm.
Everything had already happened in Washington and New York. And
Yeah.
I think that they decided they had to abort the mission. Now, how they destroyed the airplane is the big question, but again, I don't go there.
Okay, but I understand your
I
thought.
believe it, to answer your question is, yes, I believe it was remote
Yes.
control.
Okay, thank you.
And the idea of a commercial jet aircraft being rolled on its back like that would be an extremely difficult, if not impossible, maneuver to accomplish. So
Yes,
again,
thank you.
consider the source, Ray.
Yes,
Consider the
yes,
source.
yeah. I've been studying 9/11 for a while, and I've also been studying your work and a lot of people's work, and I think the planes of 9/11 is something that we have to look into, and I know that the International Center for 9/11 Justice is also kind of remote control thought. If you look at their page, it's
Right.
mentioned about that they're investigating that part, and I think that's the most. It's really it has to be more investigated, in my opinion, because I think that also there is a way that drones are controlled, and they're controlled by television guidance, that they have a camera on board the drone, and the drone can see it. It has its own eyes, and then the controller can really pinpoint, and they use this also in missiles, but also in drones, that the controller can see its target. And I think that for me was always, I think, the precise way to fly. Also the aircrafts, if you look at how the aircrafts were flown into this building, following the Hudson and doing the turn, coming into the South Tower, there were a lot of aerobatics being done by these aircrafts. It were not straight lines. It's like they were really guided towards their targets.
Yes. Again, Ray, you got to understand that they can data link navigation system up to these airplanes, and the airplane will do exactly what the system has in there.
Yes.
It
And
doesn't
where
need camera guidance. It doesn't need camera guidance.
did you ever investigate where these planes were before 9/11? Because
I heard that two of them
I
were in rework out in California. Is that what you heard?
I heard that two planes, the two United planes, were at San Francisco in maintenance weeks before the attacks.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well. It's been a while since I heard it, but I have heard that.
Yes.
So, and talking about the International Center for 9/11 Justice, I spoke with Piers Robinson, if you know who he is. He's on the
I'm
board.
only from name. I don't.
Yeah. Like immediately as I saw their website, I got a hold of him because I had talked to him before, a year before, and said, let's do a Zoom or Skype. And we got on and we talked for maybe 20 minutes, a half hour. And he told me where I said, wait a minute. I said, tell me where you plan on taking this organization, Piers. I said, what's your end game? Do you feel like you can produce enough information and evidence that will upset the whole global community, or they'll take to the streets or petition congressmen, which I consider absurdity? It'll never happen. And he goes, no, we want to educate the intelligentsia. I said, to what end? Where are you taking it from there? So what I was trying to do was, hey, at least consider jumping on this Muslim bandwagon, because that to me is the last great hope. I mean, I created a flyer and distributed it on the street here, and I got mobbed by people wanting to know about it. So I know the curiosity is there, the interest is there, and their concern is there, and we'll see what happens. I'm doing a not a PowerPoint presentation to 60 people down in Lahore, Pakistan next month, and I want to see how well that's received. But my only concern here is the government putting a stop to what I'm trying to do here personally.
Right.
You'll notice soon. If.
So we
I
had
hope.
someone
I hope
else.
not.
We had someone
Thank
else.
you. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Ray.
thank you,
Yeah.
Ray.
Yes.
Who else wanted to ask a question? Was it,
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
who is that? Oh, that's
Chris,
Chris. Go ahead.
you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan, for all your letter writing and your activism. And I certainly agree that it takes both. It takes the research, but the activism is even more important, because I mean, if you can't wake up the normies, then what's the point? You said that you were only aware of four presidents in 4 countries that talked about 9/11. Is that true?
That's the only thing I'm aware of.
Okay, well, I'll send you some information that Donald Trump mentioned it out on the golf course. He made the statement that no one has ever really gotten to the bottom of 9/11 and those that committed those horrible crimes. He did make that statement. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I could send that to you. Another senator that we have is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Actually made a comment about her thoughts that there was no plane crash on the Pentagon, and then she got really highly ridiculed for doing that. One thing you might want to do is maybe reach out to her with all the evidence that you have. That's a suggestion there. By the way, I do have a degree in aerospace engineering, so I am pretty much I am a diehard 9/11 researcher too. What velocity was the plane traveling at that hit the twin towers?
That's the big controversy. The one that hit the North Tower was the slowest of the 4 airplanes. The one that hit the South Tower was the fastest. But people come to me and say, 777 couldn't achieve those speeds at sea level.
Right, right.
because
But is
it's-
that your contention that, well, the one that hit the south tower was videotaped, so you can actually calculate the velocity, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But I think, I mean, according to my research, it was going at 580 miles an hour.
right,
That sound
right.
about right? I mean,
Yeah.
do you really think a Boeing aircraft of that configuration, even if it was civilian or military, could ever achieve that speed at sea level with two Pratt Whitney engines on it?
Personally, no, but my answer to
Okay.
people that viciously attack me, and I'm always getting
Okay,
attacked. I'm not
but that, okay, so my only comment to you is don't feel bad. You know, there's always time to change your mind and look at new research. My favorite 9/11 researcher, who's done very, very good research on the plane, his name is Richard Hall from the UK. Have you heard about him at all? In his
I think he's
3D
on my I
radar
think he's on my
analysis?
email list. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I would just encourage, if you have some spare time, just to take a look at his research. I think it's spot on. He's also an engineer like myself, and
right.
I believe that he really is spot on. So my contention, even though it's really hard to believe, and people think you're crazy when you reach out, but I believe it was a holographic cloaked missile that hit the
Okay. Okay.
tower. But I mean, I don't want to go in, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to, I see you're open-minded, and then, the fact that that plane was going so fast,
Well,
it
I
doesn't make
I get
sense
asked
from
that
Harold.
I
Yeah,
get asked that question, Chris, and I
yeah.
said, "Look, I'm not an aeronautical engineer, so
I mean, I have taken courses in aerodynamics and
Yeah.
compressible,
you
incompressible.
would
I
know
know all
more
about,
than I have."
yeah, I know all
I've
about
heard
the,
both
drag
sides. I've
coefficient.
heard both sides. People saying, "Yeah, it could
Yeah.
happen," and other people
Yeah,
saying, "No, it
Yeah, it's
couldn't."
hard. Yeah, it's hard to try that, but I would just, and then also, have you heard of John Lear, the pilot John Lear?
Oh yeah, yeah. He
Yeah.
wasn't looking at planes either. So
Yeah. So I side with John. I think John Lear was a great researcher. Didn't he start pilots for 9/11 Truth?
no,
you
Rob Balsamo and Rusty Amer did.
But didn't John Lear write some good letters to the?
I'm sure he did, but
Yeah,
I know those two guys, and they were the co-founders. And Rob Balsamo died of cancer last year or the year before. And
yeah,
Rusty,
yeah.
who I talked to, is probably the most qualified pilot I know. Told me, "Look, I'm a grandpa now. I'm getting stalked. I don't want to get involved with the 9/11 Truth movement anymore." So he
Right,
dropped out.
right.
So
Yeah, but I mean, even in my contention is, though, even though this stuff isn't being in the public domain, it is being discussed in alternative media, and more Americans. If you look at all the alternative talk shows that are a lot more, Joe Rogan from even
that's why I'm trying to get on him.
right, and then Tucker. You might, if you can get on Tucker Carlson, that'd be great.
Oh, that would be unbelievable. That'd be impossible. But that'd be
Well,
mission.
I don't know. I think you got a good shot. I think you got a good shot at it. And I mean, everyone's waking up because it's this alternative media that's going to crush mainstream media.
So
And
Jimmy Dore, if you're familiar with him, he's
oh
just
yeah. I was at his concert. I actually handed out flyers at 9/11 flyers with Al.
Oh, okay, good.
3 weeks ago. So I believe that the people that are diehard researchers too should balance it out with the activism. Because the whole movement is very important. So,
Well, my whole purpose of doing this and being on podcasts or programs is to drive people to 911pilots.org, the website.
okay.
I believe, as do my friends, that if they read the website and it's an easy read and watch the videos there, they'll agree with our contention.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. I mean, just keep on plugging away, and, eventually it's going to take some traction. I mean, they could be having military tribunals right now, yeah, it's possible, Rumsfeld, something happened to him, and then, so some of these key players just went down. Right. So,
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. We've
okay.
got other people with questions. I
Sure.
see Craig McKee has raised his hand again, but I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance. Did anybody else have a question? Okay, then Craig, go ahead with your second question.
You're muted, Craig.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Thank you for giving me a chance to get one more shot here. I'm interested in the Shanksville thing because it sort of puzzles me as to why the government would claim that the plane, hit the field and buried itself if it actually did crash right in that area. That seems a little, and what I remember from the evidence from reading, and I probably got it from David Ray Griffin's books, was the idea that there was a debris field close to like Indian Lake in that within a 3-mile area of the field. And then there was another debris field like 8 miles away. It wasn't like one continuous debris field. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why, if David Cole, like what David Cole is the case that he's making. So if you want to comment on that, but before I'll just tell you the reason I really wanted to ask a second question, or more than two, I guess, is I wanted to ask about, again, based on your expertise as a pilot, is it plausible or even possible for a plane, like in the case of the Pentagon, it flew, official speed was 530 miles per hour, and it flew right at ground level. For the last part of that. So is that even possible? And also it's supposed to have hit 5 light poles at that speed without the wings having been damaged or the plane going off course in any way. Is any of that physically possible or plausible in your mind?
Well, as far as being at ground level, keep in mind it's cruise missile technology. So I say yes. And that's the whole trick to that maneuver, was he didn't skid the surface. You get down a few feet off the surface, and those engines are slung actually beneath the fuselage on the aircraft. So they actually sit lower, and he didn't skid the surface and did it on his first attempt. And I want to, as an aside, and I'll get back to what you're talking about, why didn't they hit the Pentagon? I mean, why didn't they hit the White House or the Capitol building? And the reason was the Pentagon's a military installation, and they declared it an act of war, which enabled them to launch Operation Enduring Freedom, which they didn't come up with the idea in October 2001. It's been in the planning stages for years. So they had to hit all 4 targets on their first attempt with precision like they did. And that's why the uninterruptible autopilot would be a good candidate. But as far as clipping the light poles, I've heard arguments on both sides there. And I can't make an educated statement regarding, because I don't know enough.
Well, the people that other than Rob Balsamo, I don't know who has made a case that they could have been hit, who happened to also be a pilot. I mean, so more than the people that are saying it could have happened. So don't you lean one way or the other? I mean, 5 poles hit at that speed without any damage to the wings. I mean, does that seem plausible to you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, people are always showing me pictures of bird strikes and everything, saying they're made of aluminum. Well, they're actually stronger than that. But it's not just all aluminum, but I find it difficult to believe that 5 light poles could be hit in the airplane. Not its flight path, for one thing, have been altered, and 2, the aircraft could have structurally withstood that kind of damage.
Yeah, and in each case, the light pole just ended up right by its base, so it didn't. The wing wasn't damaged, and it didn't travel any distance, which seems like it one or the other had to happen. It would have, you would think.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, anybody else? Nope. Going once, going twice?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay, Ray, go ahead.
I have my hand up.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
We're talking about the subject of planes, and I think that what comes when these planes crash, that's very fascinating, because we have these big explosions. So we have the plane crashing into the first tower, the big explosion. second plane, big explosion. At the Pentagon, big explosion. And at Shanksville, there was a big explosion. Have you ever looked into these explosions in relation to what you know about what you think about how the planes were controlled? That these planes were weaponized as kamikaze attack aircraft doing their damage into these buildings and into
Well,
the
some arguments that the fireball exceeded the fuel on board. I mean, that the fuel on board couldn't have created a fireball that huge. So that's a possibility. And then it goes back to what Larry Fine was talking about, the tankers. I mean, the military aircraft. And if what they were doing, according to this one article, is they were going to replace the KC-135 airborne refueling aircraft the Air Force used with the 767 called the KC-767. So if that was the case, and that is what was used with an aircraft swap, they could load it up with fuel, enough fuel to cause that big a fireball.
But if you use explosions in this crash, not
Yeah.
a lot of people, I think a lot of people do not know that jet fuel is not really an explosive, but it's a flammable liquid. It's a different thing than TNT or dynamite or whatever. You cannot compare these two things because otherwise the plane would not even fly. Engines do not blow up from planes. They burn the jet fuel and they propulse. That's the propulsion. It's by burning it. It's not by exploding it. And I think this whole thing of 9/11 is also about this sentence of this one guy saying we have a bomb on board. Why did he say that? Why did he say that? And I think that's for me, 9/11 is about explosions, but it's the 4 explosions.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Really
know why.
important. NIST never
Why?
investigated it.
I agree. I agree. I haven't investigated it, Ray, and that's why we stay in our little tiny area that we do stay in, because there's arguments both ways. Many ways, in some instances, people argue these things, and I just feel for us at this point in time, given what we've done, and given that there's nowhere to take the information other than the public. And I'm afraid that the U.S. public is too apathetic. They feel it's been 22 years and they want to move on with it. Whereas I believe the Muslim community, I live in a country of 240 million Muslims. It's the second most densely populated Muslim country in the world after Indonesia. And I know from talking to people over here, they're astounded at what I tell them. I told you I got mobbed outside a mosque handing out flyers when I said there were no Muslim hijackers control. And they, how do you know? I said, I'm a 35-year pilot and I'm director of this organization. I go into explaining to them. So I know one guy said, you can't be standing out here saying that stuff. I go, well, I am. And then a guy who was a former ISI officer came over to me and said, what are you doing here? I said, well, the ISI already knows about me, so they let me stay. But that's the other thing we're going to do down in Lahore next month is hand out flyers, and we're gonna film it and put it on YouTube.
Oh,
Very good.
Thank you very much, Dan. I
Yes.
know it's time for the chickens to get up where you are.
Susan, I thought it was gonna be 40 minutes, and I was kind of rushing through what I had to say. I see I've been on here for an hour and a half, and I want to thank
You
everybody
always
for
run over.
joining us. Thank you for your questions. I'm sorry I couldn't answer all of them, and some of it was just an opinion I have. So
Right.
thank you for your interest in what we're doing and your support. We appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate you too. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it went very well. We were honored to have you. And yeah, go back to bed.
Great work, Dan.
Yeah,
Oh,
very
thank you.
good. I'm gonna stop
you.
recording now.